Well, with traditional lending channels not prepared to embrace the risk of investing in early stage businesses, crowdfunding is being touted as one of the alternative sources of funding. Now, internationally, the Kickstarter initiative has seen some successes, but these are few and far between. Now, Finweek took a look at whether this is a viable source of funding for entrepreneurial and social ventures here in South Africa. Joining me for more, Jessica Hubbard from Finweek, Greg Musiker from the Program Manager at the Hub in Johannesburg, and Stephen Ambrose, the CEO of Strategy Worx. Welcome to you all. So Mark, start off with you. It's a cover story this week. Crowdfunding, has it taken off in South Africa?
Well, I think maybe a little bit of the history. So basically about 4 weeks ago, I was actually surfing the Start Me website, and it's one of the crowdfunding initiatives in South Africa. And I actually emailed Jess, and I just said, you know, this is fantastic. They want us to take 25,000 Rand, put some money into the business, and maybe I get a foot rub out of it.
So what business is this?
No, so Start Me is a website, essentially.
Start Me.
Yeah, and the payoff, and basically the idea is you put some money into an entrepreneur you've never met, and they will then maybe give you something in return for putting your money in. And you know, this is the whole debate is like, does crowdfunding actually genuinely work, and how do you match up what the entrepreneurs do versus what you as the investor are prepared to risk? And it actually frustrated me a hell of a lot just to hear, you know, do I want chocolates for putting money into your business? Do I want a foot rub? I mean, literally there was somebody who was offering foot rubs to put money into your business. And like, I understand what they're doing, but it's one of those things that really cheapens the idea of getting early stage business funding. And I think you've got to, I'm curious about how it'll take off in South Africa, because we've had a couple of different instances where it hasn't worked. Maybe there are some successful projects, but it's still one of those things that's very much up in the air, and I think investors need to treat it with a bit of caution.
Yeah. Stephen, your thoughts on crowdfunding in South Africa right now, and you know, your experience of it?
Well, interestingly, I was an early investor in one of the Kickstarter funding
and this, of course, is a New York initiative.
It's an American initiative, and I sent them some dollars. It was handled by, but you see, they got the whole mechanism and the whole chain right. So the idea was good, but the money was held in escrow by Amazon. And only when the entire thing had been funded was the money then released to the funder. And it just felt right. So I think that is one of the things lacking in the South African context. We don't have the entire ecosystem which will make it feel right and work right. But what really worked well was that it was product-based. There was a definite return and a benefit for me. It was something I wanted.
What was that?
It was a holder for an iPod watch. So it was a watch holder which you popped your iPod into, and you can go to gym and you can do all sorts of things with your watch, and it was pretty cool. And I liked that, and apparently a lot of people liked that because it was an example you used. Nearly $1 million was raised through that particular crowdfunding instance. And the thing was that it was product-based, it was topical, and the person doing the crowdfunding had a history in creating these type of products. So it was credible. And it was easy to understand, it was simple, and the investment was small. $70 might be a lot of money, but in the context of what was going on, it wasn't terrible. I was almost prepared to lose it because it was a cool idea.
Yeah.
Whereas when a lot of the other crowdfundings, they're asking for 1,000 Rand on an iffy basis, or 10,000 or 25,000 Rand, and there's no business plan, there's no product that's going to come out of it, there's an idea and a chance. And I think people are not comfortable with that yet. I don't think there's enough of a mechanism to ensure success, and I think it's very difficult to invest on that sort of basis in an unknown person and in an unknown idea.
Yeah.
So when it's product-based, I do believe there's opportunity.
Greg, the Hub accessed crowdfunding funds to help you move into Braamfontein and help pay for a few months' rent. Tell us about your experience. And that, of course, was an international website there.
We use a platform called Indiegogo, which is similar to Kickstart, except not as limited as Kickstart. Kickstart has quite strict criteria in the projects it will accept. They want very definite products. Indiegogo allows for pretty much anyone, any type of idea to access their platform. So, and there's the discussion has been very interesting, but I feel it's just missed a few points in that, in terms of, say, investor risk. For example, what we did, we had various tiers of investment available, starting at $10, going up to $5,000. And now we don't expect for some unknown person to come and invest $5,000 in us. And fundraising, crowdfunding is just a more advanced and scalable version of traditional crowdfunding. So it involved us having to go out to a community and to access people that we know, to keep on going, and very often to pursue these people to get them to invest in us. And once you start getting them people close to invest in you, then it starts to gain legitimacy, and people who perhaps aren't as familiar with the idea, perhaps not as close to you, then gain some confidence in it and start getting involved. Because what we feel is that what crowdfunding does is just it decentralizes the funding mechanism, which is what we found really interesting. Because we're a network of about 35 hubs around the world. We're a decentralized network, and we all offering support to each other. So we had this kind of network to go into and to leverage. So that's why we found the crowdfunding model really appealing.
One of the points that came out when I interviewed Greg on this was that you can't just put your project on a crowdfunding platform and just expect the money to come in and just sit back. You've really got to be proactive in social marketing, spreading the word through your networks, online and offline. So you can't just expect the money to roll in. As Greg said, the first funds always come in from
Your
friends
peer group
and colleagues.
peer
Yeah,
funding is what they refer to.
yes. So you can't, it's not an easy ride. And the problem with the South African market is we got off to a bad start here. I don't know if Stephen was involved in that, but it was a website called crowdfunding.coza. And there are a couple of early investors in that. And for reasons that weren't really made public, the platform flopped. And a couple of others also tried. So a lot of those early sort of eager investors had a very bitter experience with it. And they're kind of unwilling to put their money on the line again. So any new platforms have that hurdle to overcome. They really have to fight hard for credibility.
Yeah, so how do you do that, and how do you structure the kind of rewards really for investors? Is it the reward of getting the product in your case, or is it the reward of getting a free album in some cases with Kickstarter, or do you want the equity in it? Or a foot rub.
In truth, the new age of crowdfunding and social business and social commerce and everything to do with technology and the web, for want of a better term, makes it sound like it's different to normal business, but it's not. Business is very, very simple. If you've got a great idea and you can articulate that idea in a really coherent way, and you can raise the finance in a structured manner, and you can execute on your plan again in a fairly structured manner and come up with returns that make a lot of sense. It's not easy, but it's possible. So now crowdfunding simply distributes that amongst a larger set of investors, whereas before it was your mother, your father, your friends, or people in the community that you could convince that your idea had legs. So in general, 80% of those ideas are not going to make it, and maybe 20% will. And after a 2-year period, only 10% of those are still in existence. But it's part of the whole entrepreneurial process of getting ideas out there, learning how to execute. And the key thing in crowdfunding is credibility, because there's a disconnect between you as the crowdfunder and the people that you're funding in. And interesting to hear that you actually had to go out and speak to people again and again and again, build the credibility, get people to buy into your vision and your idea. Only then you were funded. And maybe then crowdfunding is actually a misnomer in that, because what you were doing is selling really hard and getting a lot of people to get in, which spreads the risk, which is a good business strategy. Yeah, get lots of investors and spread your risk.
Yeah, I think building on what Stephen said, one of the platforms in South Africa that's very good is a SASX platform, which is basically social investment. So basically you can pick to back entrepreneurs, you can back food programs, etc., etc.
And I think you talked about one of those specifically in the article.
Yeah, so there was a clothing bank. So basically what they wanted to do was raise, I think it's 568,000 Rand for a specific project around empowering women entrepreneurs in the textile industry. And what they would do then is they would pull up, you had to actually submit a plan. It's backed by Greater Good South Africa, and I think Katie's one of the asset managers. So basically there's a structure in place where the money doesn't just disappear into a black hole. It sits in escrow till they've raised enough for the project. But not only does the project happen then, and it kind of gets forgotten about, but there's regular report backs. And it's a lot like charity in a schoolroom. I mean, you give your child R5 and they all chuck it into the kitty and you hope that something comes back. This gives you measured responses to it. So you can say, well, I was part of that money that went in, I put $500,000 into it, well, I was part of the people that put $500,000 in, and look at the payoff for it. And I think that's part of the whole ecosystem that Stephen is talking about.
Yeah, and as you say, backed by KD, so you need that kind of security, that credible backer there, and the financial
Absolutely.
aspect of it.
In any business investment, credibility, accountability, and structure are core.
Yeah.
Without those, it becomes really difficult. That's why Kickstarter as a process has worked so well, and why a lot of the sort of excitement around the early crowdfunding models in South Africa didn't work, because they were an interesting attempt. But they weren't structured business, unfortunately.
Greg, just before we end off here, you know, I know that Obama backs this kind of source of funding through the Jumpstart Our Business Startup. It's called the Jobs Act. It was passed this year, and they're hoping to pass it into a bill next year. But your thoughts on the role that government can play in this crowdfunding space? Is it a catalyst? Could it be a catalyst to small businesses in South Africa?
Sure. I think short answer is yes. That Jobs Act was really interesting. Where Obama was actually acknowledging this trend which was taking place, you know, this bottom-up kind of surge of funds coming into ventures, into ideas. And I think what Obama did there was recognize that it's taking place and recognize the need to support it. Similarly here, I think there can perhaps be the need for similar recognition. That's all we need, right? Because all you want is the entrepreneurs to do it themselves, and all you want is the right creative and supportive environment. And remember what we're talking now about typical modes of crowdfunding, for example, Kickstarter. And when you talk of investors, Kickstarter doesn't actually allow equity in return for their investments.
That is true.
It's people who are investing in, who find ideas interesting and are investing in those ideas and want the return to see the ideas grow. The returns, such as getting the product back, is kind of thank you for doing this with us. Bringing in that equity model is something which that Jobs Act is looking at in terms of regulating it. Because I think you know, there perhaps might be a few laws that we'd have to address if we were to do that here first. So that's why it's so interesting for me.
Yeah, as you say, you know, creating that financial incentive and that reward for investors.